Camera modes, I think, is the greatest, I wouldn't say the greatest, but one of the greatest problems that a lot of people fight over as well. You're going to find that I shoot in A or AV mode lots of times outside, and people were like, oh no, you can't, you got to be all manual if you're going to be professional. You can't shoot in any automatic mode. Well, to each their own. For me, again, the camera is so much smarter than me that I'm going to use the technology that's built into it and the mathematics that it can do and the formula equating that it can do to my advantage. And so we're going to talk about that in this segment. We're going to do some examples, some live shooting in this segment. And I want you to understand and get past that hindrance that, especially, and no offense, I'm a board of directors of the PPA. I think it's one of the greatest organizations in the world for photographers and not the greatest. But when I first got in, a lot of people told me that I had to shoot manual. And I just didn't agree with that. And so I want to build the confidence that there's multiple ways that you can do the same thing. And whatever works for you, as long as you understand the pros and cons of that method and work around it to get to the final product, who cares? Who cares? Because that's our goal as a photographer, is to make a photograph. And it should be enjoyable. And so you should be able to do it the way you want. If you're a manual person, by all means be manual. But try the other methods. So again, we're going to get into it, but in our 3-day workshops, I have two types of people. I have ones that are coming in that want to learn, and I have some that have been around for 40 years, and they know everything I'm saying, but I'm not teaching them a technique, I'm rebooting their brain. And that's what I want to do, hopefully, with you guys here and with you guys in the audience online, is if you understand one way, I just want you to trust me and allow yourselves to think of another way of doing photography without closing yourself off and not allowing a possible new technique to come in. Okay, so let's talk about, again, Canon and Nikon. I put it up here. They're almost the exact same. There's hardly any difference in the little modes and the little different buttons or anything else. There's sports, there's active. There's no difference, guys. So again, let's get past that part. Auto. We're going to go over the different modes of your camera, just really, really easy. We're going to go over this section right here. This is more of your choose your settings yourself to take various types of photographs. This is where I want you guys to be sooner or later. If you're not here today, this is where I want you to work towards. And we'll go into that a little bit later. Auto mode, this is where I want you to get away from when it comes to flash. If you're using natural light, it's okay. It could work. I don't suggest it, but it has more advantages there. If you're using a flash, it can really hinder your work, and we're going to talk about why it happens. Easy mode. You can easily shoot just by pressing the shutter button. I don't want you on this at all. At all. I want you to challenge yourself. That's not a challenge. The one thing in life, especially in photography, is if you don't continually to challenge yourself, you're going to fall behind. Someone's going to pass you by. So I want you to always continue to challenge yourself, because I've been in the business for 20 years. I have friends that have been in the business for 40 years, and we're still learning. And that's the beauty of photography, but you have to force yourself to learn. So don't ever, in a sense, take the easy mode. Movie mode and scenic mode are on a lot of cameras. We're not even going to worry about those two today, because that's not what this class is about. And we're not going to worry about the easy mode, as I talked about. So I want you to get away from those, and we're going to move into the other modes. Again, I talked about auto mode. Again, if you're on it, I understand, but I really want you to get away from it, and I want to get you into the creative aspects of it. So we're going to really concentrate our camera settings on these settings here. This section on these settings, because this is where I want you to go with it. All right, so we're going to start off with the P, which is also shutter speed. Automatically, this is the program mode. A lot of people still make fun of it if you're a pro photographer, and it's kind of the auto, but not quite as auto. But it automatically sets your camera at the camera's maximum flash sync speed, which is generally 1/200th or 1/250th of a second. I don't like that right there. I don't like automatically setting my flash at anything, my shutter speed for my maximums of anything. I don't like photography. There's no generalization. I mean, there's no exacts in everything. So I could literally go into one place, and you could go into the same place. We'll have the same model, the same camera, the same lens, the same everything, and we're going to have two different complete images because you're still taking the photo. So this is why I don't like the P, is because it's automatic, and it really standardizes you as an artist. And I really want you to kind of get away from that. So shutter speed, Again, so the f-stop is, the shutter speed automatically gets set at your flash sync speed, and then the f-stop automatically sets the camera's f-stop according to the camera's built-in programming. So again, it's doing the fastest shutter speed you can possibly get away with, and then setting the f-stop to give you that proper balance of exposure depending on what you're photographing. Again, the main concept behind the P mode is that flash photography is the camera tries to set the highest shutter speed that you can hold with your camera by handheld and not rely on a tripod. Well, that's kind of nice. That's good, but we're going to talk about ways that you can get around this, that really is not needed in just a minute. So again, if you're on P, I want you to open up and I want you to get away from it and I want you to get to one of these other ones. So TV, which is shutter priority or shutter speed, it can set the shutter speed between 30 seconds and the camera's maximum sync speed. So I like this because it's giving you options now. It's not just set automatic on anything, and I think that's a key to this whole concept. And then the f-stop, it automatically sets to match the shutter speed that you have set. So if you set an f-stop, whatever, it's going to balance everything out. This is good. I use it occasionally. I'm not going to lie. Every once in a while I do use the shutter priority. But the one that I like, and it explains what it is. In this mode, the camera works in fill flash mode, which is when in TV mode, it always tries to expose the background adequately. Well, yes, ma'am.
Can you give me a couple examples of when you would use this?
I absolutely can never do that. No, of course I can. If I'm in a situation where I need to freeze action, I'm going to go to this mode because I can set my shutter speed to what I need it to be, the fastest, and then allow my f-stop to automatically set itself. And I only need to worry about one of those two items. Again, as we said right before break, the less mathematics I need to think about, the better photographer I can be, which is why I like some of these settings. So if I'm in a situation where I don't need to worry about the depth of field, or the depth of field is not as important as me freezing the action or the speed of what I'm photographing, I would use this mode.
Thank you.
But most of the time, I'm going to use this mode. I'm in A or AV mode. A is Nikon, AV is Canon, no different. This is what I like when I'm outside. And we'll explain why in just a second. Automatically set 30 seconds in the camera's maximum seek speed to match the lens aperture you have set. I like shallow depth of field. Several reasons. One, I think it draws attention to whatever I'm photographing if it's a portrait of a person. But two, a big difference is if you're in those automatic settings, it's going to set your flash sync speed to set, and then your f-stop is going to be f11, f16, and so that's a huge depth of field. So most of the people out there that are not professionals are going to set a huge depth of field, and so everything in their image is going to be in focus. You have this with a shallow depth of field, it completely looks like a different image. Your clients are going to go, wait a minute, I can't do this. I don't understand how they got this shallow depth of field, and it's going to give more validity to you being a professional in their eyes. Plus, I can control my depth of field. If I have a groom, which we're going to do some examples later on, I think tomorrow, especially we're going to have a couple, we'll have two, like depth of field. I want to have the bride in focus. I want to have the groom a little soft focus. I can do that here. I can change my f-stop from 2.8 to maybe 5.6. Give me a little more depth of field, and then my shutter speed is going to keep up with me. And that's important to me. And generally, if you're shooting wide open, and we're going to talk about how we can do that, you're going to have a very fast shutter speed, so we don't need the tripod anymore. Because at again, we're going to get into high-speed sync, but at 1/2000th of a second, I'm not going to have a shake in my image. And so to me, that really opened up a whole, because I learned on a tripod, shooting very slow, 1/60th of a second, had to have a tripod or everything was going to be blurry. And it limited me. I got great images, but it limited my versatility and my movement aspect. And so once you can kind of get away off that tripod, it really allows you a lot more mobility. Again, you can set the f-stop aperture to whatever you like, and we just talked about that. And here's the main thing about that is, in this mode, if the shutter speed is some really low number so that you need a tripod to avoid camera shake blur, this is why I don't use this inside. I get away from A or AV mode on the inside because it's going to give me I set the f-stop, and even in low light at 2.8, if you have a zoom, 2.8, you're going to, maybe 1/10th of a second, 1/20th of a second on your shutter speed, it's going to shake tremendously. As a general rule of thumb, and if you guys, I know we talked earlier, You shot film, so you might remember this, but as a general rule of thumb, a lot of digital photographers have forgotten this golden rule. Whatever millimeter you're shooting at, whatever your lens is at, is the slowest shutter speed you should ever shoot without getting handshake. So if you're shooting a 100 millimeter lens, the slowest your shutter speed should be is 1/100th of a second. Any slower than that, you will get movement in your images just by holding your camera. Now there's a few workarounds with IS or VR that's been developed, the image stabilization that's in some of the lenses of Canon and Nikon. But as a general rule, I don't want to rely on that. Remember that golden rule and you're going to be fine. This is why so many people, I don't know if you have it, but I get it all the time, because we photograph lots of little leagues and we have a volume business and everything else, and I'm out there and people coming up looking at cameras, and we shoot our little leagues with maybe a 60D or a 70D, not the biggest, baddest camera out there because you don't need to. And so they're coming up with their Mark IIIs or their bigger cameras, and they want to talk to me about all this stuff, but then they have the inexpensive like 70 to 300 5.6 lens, and they want to know why they're getting horrible photographs in low light. They're like, oh, it works great during the day, but when the baseball field lights are on, I don't get any images. They're all blurry. And this is why, because they're zoomed into 300 millimeters, and the light goes down, and they only can get about a 1/100th of a second on their shutter, and every image is blurry. So remember that. It is a very, very valuable tool, especially if you're shooting low light, and we're going to talk about that in a second, and even show you examples like in a reception hall. If you don't have flash, it's going to be blurry. And if you do have flash, which we're going to show, the background will be blurry. So just remember that. So shutter speed, camera modes, how they affect the flash. So this, you can set the shutter speed in manual mode, and you can set it to anything you want. So if I'm not in AV or A mode, I'm in manual mode on my camera. Those are the two modes that 99% of the time I shoot. The only a few times would be in the TV mode, the shutter priority, which we talked about. I don't mind manual. I enjoy manual, but outside, when I'm in AV mode, if I only have to change one thing, I set my f-stop where I want it to be. If the sun comes out, it's going to automatically adjust my shutter speed for the proper exposure, and if the clouds come over the sun, it's going to lower my shutter speed for get the exact same exposure. I don't have to think about all this in manual. So in manual, if I'm in 2.8 all the time and that happens, I'm constantly looking at my light meter in my camera, adjusting my shutter speed to get proper exposure. So I literally in AV mode can take two shots in two different complete lighting environments and have the exact same exposure, where in manual I'm constantly changing. So I adjusted to my AV outside because of the wetting environment that I learned this in, because things happen fast. And I didn't want to have to constantly keep changing all my lighting situations on my camera. And sometimes it's so bright, if we're photographing on the beach, because we live on the beach, I can't even see my meter in my camera unless I really shove it to my face. I have glasses, so that was a hindrance for me. I didn't want to take off my glasses because then I would lose my glasses. So it was even harder to do that. Exactly, yeah. So manual's great. You can set shutter speed anywhere between 30 seconds and the camera's maximum sync speed. The f-stop, you can set at anything. So obviously manual, you can set your complete control. This, in the film days, was absolutely a necessity. You had to do it this way. Off-camera lighting, and the technique that we're really going to start getting into at the end of today and all day tomorrow, is the way that I teach it is really a digital world technique. It allows you to take the most of this digital camera that we have and use it to its fullest, because you get that instant feedback. I can teach people studio lighting in 30 minutes, what took me half a year to learn before in film days, because I don't have to do any measurements. Get that instant feedback. So it really, this technique we're going to be showing you is really valuable to today's modern technique. So for flash, again, we talked about we want to stay manual when we're inside in low light. And that's kind of where we're going to go with this segment. So we're going to actually take some shots here in a minute with our model. We got a few more slides, but we're going to concentrate on manual mode. We want to basically slow down the shutter speed because we haven't got above flash sync speed yet. So in the old days, my camera flash sync speed was 1/60th of a second. Today's, most of your cameras are between 1/200th. So if you have like the 5D Mark II, the Mark III for Canon, it's 1/200th of a second. If you have the 60, 70s, 80Ds, it's not even out yet. But if you have those, it's 1/250th of a second. And then Nikons, most of them are 1/250th. Some of them can even go a little higher. But so generally you're between the 1/200th and 1/250th of a second. You can't get above that with your flash sync speed or and use flash photography. And we'll show you some examples of what happens when you do. So, and then AV mode when we're outside when there's plenty of light. So when I'm going outside tomorrow, when we shoot on the roof, I'm going to be in AV mode. Or A mode if you're Nikon. And I'm going to set my f-stop to what I want it to be. And I'm going to allow the camera to set the shutter speed to what it wants to be. Because at that point, I don't really care what the shutter speed is. It's going to be bright enough. It's going to freeze my action because I care about the depth of field. That's what I worry about. That's what I want to control. I want to control how much of the skyline of Seattle I see, or the roof, or whatever I want to have in the background. It could be, the church if you're shooting a wedding. It could be the pier if you're on a beach. In my environment, where I'm from, we have the runoff of the Mississippi River. Everything on my beach is ugly. We're at the very back of the Gulf of Mexico, from the tip of Florida to the peninsula of Mexico, and so everything that gets fallen off a ship comes up on my beach as well. So it's very brown, it's very sandy, it's very muddy, and then on top of that, we have the largest chemical plant in the Western Hemisphere in my backyard. So it's not real romantic for me to get out on a beach and you see trash, brown water, brown sand, and the big chemical plant in the background. I couldn't use a reflector because I'm on a beach. It's 15 miles an hour wind on a good day because that's a kite in my area. So I had to learn to use a flash. But then my problem was I had to learn how to get that depth of field out. That's why I use AV outside. I could blur that background out. So if I am in the evening and you see the lights of the chemical plant, now they're just blurred out, beautiful lights of golden lights in the background, and you can't tell what it is. And so by me being able to control that depth of field, it really became an empowering tool for my photography, where the other way around, you saw the trash on the beach and you saw the chemical plant in the background, and it just wasn't near as attractive. So manual mode inside, A or AV mode outside. When you get below that golden rule of whatever millimeter I'm shooting at, my shutter speed automatically get below that, that's when you switch over to manual mode on your camera. Does that make sense? All right, I want to make sure that's clear, because we always have our students that say that in our workshops, and then they go, I don't know why all my photos are blurry. And then they go, well, you're on AV mode and it's 10 o'clock at night. So it's not going to happen. Okay, so slow sync dragging the shutter. Has anyone ever tried this? It's not the easiest, but it's not the hardest. I equivalent this to the I just took my dad to the Masters. It was his dream. We just got back from the Masters golf tournament. And I equivalent slow sync, dragging the shutter, to the game of golf. It's the easiest thing to do, but it's the hardest to be good at. And so it takes practice. And so when you actually do this technique, it's very creative. You can do a lot with it in camera, which again we talked about before. I like to do as much as I can in camera. I don't like to rely on Photoshop. Photoshop is a great tool. In fact, I've learned a lot from the Creative Live Photoshop classes, but I still like to get as much as I can in the camera. I don't want my light to change. I don't want to have to change the posing. I want to get all my lighting and my posing down and exposure properly, and then fine tune it in Photoshop. And so dragging the shutter does that, but there's several examples here, and I wanted to show you what the concept is extremely slow shutter speed. We're in manual mode on our camera, extremely slow shutter speed, and the flash, the subject is close enough to the flash on your camera. This is not an off-camera technique, it's an on-camera technique. So the flash will freeze the action. And then where the flash falls off, that's the blurriness. That's where the handshake comes into play. Does that make sense? So you're going to slow your shutter speed down depending on what lens you use. I suggest you use a wider lens, because that allows me a slower shutter speed. Because if I'm shooting at 70 millimeters, I can only go to 1/7 of a second. But if I shoot a 16 millimeter, I can go to 1/15 of a second and not really have any handshake just by taking the photograph. And that 1/15 of a second is going to allow a lot more ambient light in that dark room. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
Would you be turning off your image stabilization then to use this technique?
That is a very, very good question. Generally, yes, I would. I would turn it off. Most of the time, I don't even use image stabilization, to be honest. It really, on a long wedding day or a long wedding event, it really eats up your battery. I have a great friend who is my mentor in sports photography named Bob Levy out of Houston. He is a unbelievable sports photographer, and I used to shoot on the sidelines with him side by side in the Texans games. And I was there, and I had my camera, same as him. I had a 400 millimeter 2.8, same as him. And he came over to me, and he, halfway through the game, my battery's halfway dead, and he looks over at me, and he turns off my IS, and he goes, "You're just wasting, it's just a waste of battery power. Don't have it." And it never hit me until then that just because I have it doesn't mean I need to use it all the time. And so start concentrating on what the pros and cons of those tools are, and just use what you really need, and don't have all the bells and whistles. And so on that story, I was standing in the sidelines in the corner, and I had, at the time, I think it was the Mark, I don't know, camera took like 7, 8 frames a second, and here comes the play, and I just unload, just release the camera and just let it fly. And he goes, click. And I go, what? And he looked at my images, and there was a ball there, and then the ball was already in his arms, and I looked at his, and it was just on his fingertips. And that's when I realized there's also, again, technique. There's an art behind this. I can teach you all this science, and that's what we're going to go over for the next 2 days, but it's still up to you as the photographer to change the way you shoot, to change the science into art. And that's what I'm going to try to hopefully relay upon you. I'm going to give you the science. I'm going to work 2 days to give you the science, but I really want you to take that and expand and go into the art aspects of it. So here it is. This is the settings for that, 1/8 of a second. I'm shooting with a 16 millimeter lens, 1/8 of a second. So very slow. I'm going to get handshake. 3.2 f-stop, because that lens at the time I know it was not real sharp at 2.8, so I put it up to 3.2, and then a higher ISO. You're going to want to use the lowest ISO possible to get away with the shot that you need. There's no exact science behind that. Today's new cameras, you can get away with a lot more ISO than you could in the old days. I know you had your medium format, and if we got above 800, it was grainy, grainy, grainy. And today, I'll forget and leave it on 1600 all day long, and there's no difference. I mean, it is a huge advantage in low light. So my suggestion is set your settings, your camera, your f-stop, and your shutter speed where you want them for this technique. Take a shot. Natural light, ambient, just bringing in the ambient. And if it's too dark, you raise your ISO. Keep raising it until you get to where you like the ambient light, the background. And then you leave your camera settings alone. Yes, sir.
But you mentioned that this would be an on-camera flash technique.
Absolutely.
Why could you not have off-camera flash giving you, assuming that it's pointing directly at your subject?
If it's pointing directly at your subject, then you're going to be off to the side. You technically can. It can work. Better results will be on camera. So I guess that's more of a clarification. Because if you notice in this image, they're in the center. You put them in the center each time. And that's what you want. You want to put them in the center and allow the blurriness to go around them. Because again, this technique is not easy. You're going to get everybody blurry lots of times. And so you'll take 50 shots and get one good one at first, and then you'll take 50 and you get 5 good ones, and then you take 50 and you get 10 good ones. That's the way it needs to work. You'll probably never get above 30, because I still don't. But because you get too slow with shutter speed, you get too fast, and we're going to show you how to do this in just a second to show you a lot of the failures. And if you notice, this image has the zoom, and the other one had a twist. And so there's multiple techniques you can also do with this. You can even get more creative if you want, if you have a tripod. I know a lot of people, the state of Texas, you go to the Capitol and they zoom in and out when they're doing those long exposures. I mean, you really can get some creative stuff with this. So, but as a general rule, you set your shutter speed, you set your f-stop, and then you raise your ISO up to allow for the room. Light. Does that make sense? And then you keep your subject in the center, and then you either twist or you zoom with the lens, and we're going to go over all that, because that way everything's going to be blurry around them, and they're going to be focused in the center. It also allows you to do a creative crop in post if you want to do that. Just depends on what you want to do in Photoshop or Lightroom or whatever. You can put him off to the side and the 3/4, whatever you want to do. But the point is you get it focused, you get him in the center, because if you put him off on the side, it's just like anything else, especially if you twist. The center is going to stay the same. The outside is going to be very blurry. So the farther they get on the outside, the more blurry they're going to become. They're going to go. Does that make sense? Here's another one. You notice in the center. Just all I did here was just zoom the lens in when I took the image or zoomed it out. And so as I took the shutter in that between that 1/16 of a second, I zoomed the lens. And that's what's giving you the blur back here. Very slow shutter speeds, flash on camera. It's not about in the whole skins of making a world-renowned winning image. It's about a technique because you're going to take tons of photos of them just dancing. But if you get them on the dance floor like the shot before and it shows movement, it adds a little more life to it, especially if you have a really boring wedding. Because then the bride's going to go, I didn't remember all these people dancing. And I'm like, yeah, there was one song, they danced for half a song, and you got 50 images and you do a couple like this. It really adds to the whole portfolio of your presentation. So it's a very easy thing, but the problem is there's lots of faults to this. If you notice the shutter speed changed on each one of them, because it depends on what lens I'm using, it depends on how much blur I want. If you get too much blur, if you twist it too much, you'll have lights that go over their face. There's lots of little things that can go wrong. So when you do this technique, expect it. Know that that's going to happen and just keep practicing. Questions? Okay, kind of review. We want to be in manual mode, inside and low light, A or AV mode outside with lots of light. When it drops below the hand, whatever millimeter you're using, your shutter speed drops below that, you go into manual. Makes sense. Man, you're concentrating a lot. You're
I'm
scaring me,
fine.
sir.